And welcome back to The Way of the Wandering Wizard. I am, as always, Robert Andrew Meredith Kennedy, although most folks know me as Bob the Wizard. And I am a pure and open channel for the finest vibration of divine love and light, made manifest here, in service to Gaia and those who travel with her. In my last little video, I was waxing lyrical about joyous days starting work at Ground Truth, prior to my accident. So, casting my mind back some 20 odd episodes, I don't know, I've been talking a lot, it's been helpful. I'm now back in my room at the Kent and Sussex Hospital, having reminisced across the life I've just shared with you, while still dealing with my outer body and a slightly altered state of being, I suppose, altered state of perception. That soul level way of looking at the world still running, as it overlooked that life and how that life has interacted with lots of other experiences. It was an interesting point for me in my knowing. Of course, it should be borne in mind that at the time, that mind was lifted and driven by copious quantities of pain relief. Now, unbeknownst to me, over the course of those days when I kept pressing my driver, the relief I was getting was slightly less. Something was clearly up, but I must say these were a series of ongoing operations I'd been through, a huge amount. And naturally those recoveries are very painful experiences, physically, mentally and emotionally. The cracks had started to appear. I was having a few little moments, a few little outbursts, getting a little bit grumpy. Why was I waiting for an operation? I'd been on the list, off the list, nil by mouth, off. I was playing havoc with my stomach. There's nothing quite so irritable as lying there all day waiting. And then my brother came in and carefully explained, should be explained to all patients really, was that I'd hogged the list prior to over the last 3 operations. Because mine was the priority, and now my foot, as intricate as the repair was a lower priority. It wasn't life-threatening. And so I'd have to wait. Well, some 4 days later from the last op, I was on the list. As always, wheeled through the hospital by the wonderful porters, chatting away, a chance to see some different walls than the 4 walls of my room. I arrived in the bay, had my pre-med, my usual slightly drifty conversation, and thankfully, as always, everything went black, and my foot operation went ahead very successfully. Now, prior to that, every time I'd woken up and recovered, drifty, I come to quite quick, but I tended to be quite chatty. I was well pain managed and relatively easy then back on the ward. As I came to, from this operation, something was definitely wrong. My foot just felt like somebody was pouring boiling oil over it. The nerve pain was just intense. My leg was throbbing, and I was actually showing signs of physical distress. The stats were all over the place. I can't even remember the poor lad that was recovering me, but he'd been with me on other operations and was seriously knew me enough to know that something wasn't quite right. Consultant was summoned, a quick check back through my records, and a large amount of pain relief was administered and things started to calm down. It really, really bounced me. Even getting back on the ward, my response to pain was different. I'd gone from this intense on the road to a steady drop in the peak pain, shall we say, to this ache that was manageable with pain relief. And now all of a sudden I'd gone for a massive spike. As it transpires, the morning of that operation I had unusually been asleep. Well, I was an active person, I am an active person. I was used to working all day, quite often 2 jobs. Boundless energy of the Reiki master flowing through me, enlivened by my children, to basically doing nothing apart from healing bones and repairing wounds. I wasn't sleeping so well. As you can imagine, large amounts of opiate pain relief is really conducive to deep sleep as well. So I was in a pattern, but for some reason that morning I was actually sleeping deeply. One of the nurses had just opened the door. She didn't realise that I was due an operation that day. Seeing me asleep, decided that I'd wake up, I'd ring the bell, I'd ring my buzzer when I needed pain relief, and that they'd fit me back in. As it transpired, I'd woken up and been taken straight to the theatre, so what was technically down as a refusal, in fact that I'd slept through. So I'd arrived slightly leaner on my pain relief than was expected, so that was wearing off. Obviously we're anaesthetised, stats are monitored, so that was fine during that, but the buffer had dropped. That night was a difficult night. I was irritated. My driver really wasn't working now. I kept ringing the bell. The nurses had given what pain relief they could, so I asked for a meeting with the pain relief expert, the pain relief nurse. She came in the next morning. We had quite an intense conversation. I think in many ways my gabbly, open-hearted way of speaking post-accident, probably a little bit pre-accident, where I tried to inform her, as I had the anaesthetist, of some of my history of taking drugs recreationally in the past, was somewhat misconstrued as to I was a drug addict in the past. My mind, and in many, there's a difference between those that have used and those that it's taken over a lot. It wasn't the case for me. Either way, it was negotiated that my driver would go, that I'd be put on stronger slow-release tablets, and that the breakthrough pain would be moderated with oral morphine. I could take this on demand as required up to set doses. My concern was that I'd start begging. The one thing that the syringe driver did was delivered an amount. There's no human there to negotiate with. It delivers what it's supposed to deliver. Well, I think it's fair to say that I'd got into some kind of body pain lock. I'd gone to sleep for the operation. I'd woken up in a lot of pain. My body didn't want to go to sleep. It was already highly animated. It was already not sleeping a lot anyway. So what started over the next few days, to be honest, a bit of a drug-fueled run through life. As the time progressed, I became more connected, more talkative, more erratic, to the point that I became quite a bit of an ego, if I'm honest. I started making demands of my family. Go here, do this. You always have to have a phone on. I am important. You need to hear me. You need to hear my story. One of the things that happen with extensive drug use. I say, there's a reason for all of these things. As I was avoiding the pain, I didn't like the bounces in and out of pain relief that I'd been having. So my basis was, if I was awake and kept topping it up, I'd be fine. Now, clearly, I was living a 24-hour with the occasional drifty sleep experience. My friends, both at GT at Ground Truth, I find many of them work shifts, so I'd have folk to talk to, WhatsApp message in the night. By now I'd got a phone. I'd gone on Facebook, opened a channel, decided that you all needed to hear exactly what I had to say. No change there, and I hope you're getting a somewhat calmer message these days. But in those animated states of connection, I was reaching out. That's a natural reaction, I suppose, but I was reaching out. I had a story to tell. And so the ex-crash test dummy was born online. Now, I had a phone, I had plenty of friends. I started to lose track of time, and eventually I was phoning them up at 3 o'clock in the morning to give them long, interesting insights into how the universe works, mainly fueled by oromorph, which may have been a point of observation, might not have been the most accurate one. As I say, at the time of the accident, I was, and have done since, run at very different levels of consciousness. Well, needless to say, the brethren got a little bit fed up with me phoning them up and talking to them in the middle of the night, having ascertained that I had now completed my operations. And so why, if I'd completed my operations, was I begging more and more morphine until I was taking it almost hourly? bored, frightened of being in pain, ego running and demanding more. Yeah, I would say all of those things. Well, it came to a head, and the boys came in for a visit. But I will introduce that little chapter out in the next little part of my recovery, bearded tit therapy and my escape from hospital home. Thank you as always to listening to the tales and meanderings and wanderings of a wise old wizard on a Saturday afternoon. Take care, go well, and blessed be.